Republican Congressman Brandon Gill of Texas tweeted this about President-elect Donald Trump, saying, quote, "They raided Mar-a-Lago. They called him an insurrectionist. They filed lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit against him. They tried to take him off the ballot, but he still won. And now that Trump has won, one of the chief villains at so-called President Joe Biden's Injustice Department, Jack Smith, the special prosecutor charged with going after Trump for allegedly mishandling classified documents while president and for attempting to supposedly illicitly influence the 2020 presidential election in Georgia, is set to release a damning report on Donald Trump and then resign, all before Trump is sworn in as president and begins to drain the swamp, hopefully. Now, understandably, President-elect Trump and his co-defendants in both cases are demanding that the courts block Jack Smith's attempt to launch one last fusillade against Trump as Smith heads for the exits. Now, many of Trump's top cabinet picks, like incoming Attorney General Pam Bondi, have vowed to prosecute those bad prosecutors who abused their power, as Jack Smith clearly did, and honestly has been known for a long time, to pursue a nakedly partisan political agenda against Trump's reelection. And we know for a fact that Jack Smith in particular abused the special powers he was granted to prosecute Trump. Now here's Republican Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio accusing the Department of Injustice as much last year.
Jack Smith mishandled the evidence. We don't want to bring up Trump, but in that case, you got the prosecutor who seized the documents and changed the order that he seized the documents. The physical documents don't match up with the actual scanned documents. Some people might say that's tampering with evidence. That happened, and the judge down there said, wait a minute, we got to hold on here. What's going on? And of course, the irony is, Jack Smith mishandled documents while he's charging President Trump with mishandling documents. You can't make this stuff up. So I think in some ways, a reference to what's going on with President Trump is entirely appropriate.
In fact, Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, accused Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland of violating the Constitution when he hired Jack Smith as special prosecutor.
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
Clearly, accountability, real accountability, not fake for show accountability, needs to be had. We cannot just drop these matters now that Donald Trump is once again president, no matter how hopeful the future seems. And it'll be up to the Republicans in Congress to ensure that is not dropped. People like my next guest, Congressman Brandon Gill, who has been placed on the House Judiciary Committee as well as the House Oversight, I believe. Congressman Gill, congratulations on your congressional win. I think you're a great addition to Congress. And man, that's some really significant committee assignments. Good for you, Representative Gill.
Well, thank you. And Emerald, it's great to join you here. We've got a ton of work to do. We've got I think that we've got a lot of consensus on the Republican side to enact the Trump agenda, to enact it expeditiously and aggressively. So I'm excited to get started.
I feel as if, and maybe I'm wrong, Donald Trump, you referenced in a tweet some of what has been done to him by the Department of Injustice. I feel like, especially in that wide-ranging press conference he had a little earlier today, he's talking a little bit more about the government corruption. He's talking a little more about the informants in January 6th. He's talking about the pipe bomber. He's talking about the evil axis that was engaged against him. I won't lie, you're new to the committees, so you've got a clean slate here, Representative Gill, but it is no secret that I have been very critical of some of your colleagues on the committees for maybe not doing enough, continuing to fund, for one thing, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the DOJ. But now they have a president who should stand with them. Do you expect, and again, I'll remind our audience, you just got sworn in a few days ago. Do you expect that there will actually be accountability, that perhaps now that Donald Trump is in the Oval Office, the members of Congress and specifically those relevant committees will be empowered to actually clean up the corruption and enforce some kind of accountability?
Well, I think that that's a key part of the Trump mandate that all of us ran on to varying degrees. Every single Republican ran on this. And listen, it is because of President Trump that we have a majority in the House and that we have a majority in the Senate. So I think that that's going to be a huge focus for us. Every single American saw what happened to President Trump over the past few years. They saw the raid at Mar-a-Lago. They saw two assassination attempts against him. They've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of bogus charges by rogue prosecutors across the country, and they're sick of it. They recognize that there's a real serious problem in this country with a legal system that can be so easily weaponized against the leader of the then opposition party, President Trump, virtually with impunity. They're sick of it. The American people want to see Republicans stand up and start swinging back at the left to not just investigate what they're doing, but follow it through with prosecutions. You know, the great thing about now that we have a majority in the House, and now that President Trump is coming in about 2 weeks, is that we're going to have our side at the DOJ. We're going to have our side controlling the committees, and we'll actually be able to follow through in a way that I think was much more difficult to do over the past 2 years. So I'm excited to get started, and I think other Republicans are as well.
So what I'm hearing from you, and I think is good news, you actually expect more criminal referrals from these committees to the Department of Justice that hopefully will have been cleaned out enough that they will actually follow up on the referrals and engage in prosecution. Because at this point, we saw what happened the first 4 years. There has to be accountability because we see what happens when there's not.
That's certainly what I would hope to see, and I will be pushing for that. And I think that there are other Republicans who will be fighting aggressively for accountability from the deep state, from rogue prosecutors, from leftists who have weaponized the federal apparatus against their political enemies. There's nothing more un-American than using taxpayer dollars, taxpayer resources from our federal government to go after people that you politically disagree with. And yet, over the past 4 years, Democrats have normalized this behavior. They're normalizing political violence in a way that would have been unheard of even just simply 10 years ago. You know, we experienced political weaponization in my family. My father-in-law had to deal with that early on in 2012, 2013, 2014, before it was cool, you might say, back whenever people were talking about it a lot less than they are today. But this has developed to a staggering degree by the left. And we've got to put a stop to it, because if we don't change things that the left are using to structurally go after Republicans, it's going to get harder and harder for us to compete politically. I think that we will. I think that we will fight hard, but we've got our work cut out for us.
You know what? You bring up an excellent point. You actually have a personal kind of bone to pick with government corruption. I actually met your father-in-law during that period that he was being persecuted by the corrupt Obama regime. I met him at a Freedom Fest. Was very impressed with him. And then, you know, of course, he ended up he faced severe consequences under Obama. So no one knows better than your family how bad the problem is. I do want to take a listen to something that incoming CIA director nominee John Ratcliffe had to say to Maria Bartiromo recently. Listen.
Yeah, so that famous photograph, what we have now learned, and the government has had, Jack Smith and his prosecutors have had to admit that that was staged. And those top secret classified sheets that all the public saw and said, oh my God, look at those top secret documents, those were placed there by the FBI. And what Jack Smith admitted in court this week was that, in his word, they mishandled the classified documents and misrepresented those to the court. Maria, that's a kind way of saying we tampered with the evidence, then we lied to the court about it. And they got caught when President Trump's lawyers and the other co-defendants raised this issue and said, look, the documents here don't match up. The documents that were presented to us don't match the digitally scanned records of when they were taken from Mar-a-Lago.
Brandon, part of the problem with the committees that you've been sitting on is that they've been stonewalled on documents, right? They've been stonewalled by these agencies in providing documents that they have a right to see in part of their oversight. Is there a plan to resubmit those as soon as you have people like John Ratcliffe in place?
Well, I think we've got to go after these agencies pretty aggressively. You know, the left had no problem throwing Steve Bannon in prison whenever he defied a congressional subpoena. We've got to use the same level of force and the same level of aggression against the deep state whenever it's being weaponized against us. Whenever a congressional committee asks for documents or asks for things that we are authorized to do, we need to get a response, and we need to get it quickly from these agencies. So I expect that we're going to go after these agencies quite quickly here.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears real quick before we run out of time. Some of the big news of the day is that Zuckerberg has had to come to Jesus and about face, and he's no longer for censorship. I don't have time to play the video, but I do want to pull up your tweet in which you said this is a sea change in the direction of Facebook. Zuckerberg spelled out his vision of free speech at Georgetown 29 to the consternation and shock of the left. Facebook then proceeded to cave, engaging in mass censorship. The tide has turned. Good for Zuckerberg. I'm sorry, see, I can't even say his name. I still call him Zuckerberg. I do not like the guy. I'm still censored. It doesn't matter if he quits the fact checking. Do you really believe he's changed? I implore you in Congress, don't buy it. Let's please have some oversight of the social media companies from someone who's still actively censored.
Well, I'm happy to see this move, but I will believe it when I see it. You know, once the fact checks are gone, once we see conservatives having the same standing on Facebook and other social media platforms that liberals have, then I will really begin to believe it. You know, the censorship organism at these social media companies is so complex and so deeply ingrained into the algorithm that this could take quite a bit of time to root out. You know, we saw that with X whenever Elon Musk initially bought the platform. It took some time to go through and comb through the algorithm to see what these rogue leftist coders were putting in it. So we'll see what happens. I think that this is a step in the right direction, and that's great news. You know, Facebook never really wanted to take responsibility for the censorship that they were pushing on Americans, so they outsourced it to these fact checkers, which we knew were leftist activists. I've dealt with them in the past. They are incredibly dishonest, and they've known for years that there's nobody else that we can really turn to. They see themselves as the arbiters of truth. So I hope that these people lose the power that they've had on Facebook over the past 4 years. But again, we'll believe it when we see it.
I think people actively died because of his censorship. So I really want to see Zuckerberg prosecuted. I can't mince my words. I do want to say though, Congressman Gill, congratulations again. I'm excited you're in Congress. I'm excited to see how this goes for you. I've known your wife for some time now. I've always thought she had a bright future, and it's now apparent that the full family has a bright future. Such a beautiful family. Tell her hello and congratulations again, and we'll be watching.
Thanks for having me.